Hey everybody, let's take 5 minutes out of our day and meditate on God's Word together. If Jesus is the Son of God after all, why doesn't everybody come to Him? If the gospel is good news, then why do some people reject it? Well, Jesus tells us in the parable in Matthew 13 the reason. Matthew 13 verse 3. He told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell among the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Now this is called by many names, the parable of the sower or the parable of the seed, but it's really the parable of the soils. That's the variable in this. There's one sower here, a guy, and then when they sowed seed, they would just cast it out, or they have a bag of seed on their beast of burden, and they would cut a hole and it would just fall on top. They didn't really dig necessarily, plant it, then they would just cast seed out. That's one way of doing it. But the variables here are the 4 different types of soil. And these 4 different types of soil represent those who receive the word in different ways based on their own nature or based on other circumstances. It says here that one is those who it fell on the path. So this is kind of a packed soil, but this represents those that the devil plucked from their heart. Now, Jesus explained, the reason we know this is because Jesus explained the parable later on. This is one of those rare occasions where he tells us exactly what the parable means. And then there are others that fall on the stony soil, and that stony soil represents those who, when they receive the word, some kind of trouble comes into their lives, they face some sort of persecution, and they immediately leave because of it. And then there's those that fall on the seed that falls on the thorny ground, the thorny soil. And Jesus says this is the kind of person who, when they receive the word, it's choked out by the cares of life, the anxiety of life. And it's choked out by the desire for riches and comfort in life. And then the 4th kind is the good soil. This is the soil that someone hears the word and they understand it and they begin to bear fruit. So the question is, why doesn't someone stick with Jesus? Well, the answer then is, it's not because of Jesus. It's not because of the message. The fault lies with the hearer. And this prompts us to ask a question about ourselves. What kind of soil are you? What kind of listener are you? Does temptation draw you away from Jesus? You receive the word, but then temptations come and trials come, and the devil plucks that word out of your heart. Suddenly, that's no longer your concern because it hasn't gone deep enough. Or are you the type of soil that you stick with Jesus for a bit, but then when trouble comes, when persecutions come, you bail? When there's trouble based on you being a Christian, or troubles in your church family, that you just leave? Or do you have anxiety over your daily life, the needs of life, or just your need for stuff, your desire for stuff, and that causes anxiety and pressure in your life? Have you been seeking your life from other things than Jesus? Or do you let the seed take root in your heart? Do you let God's word into your heart and just reach all through the soil of your psyche? Do you let it go all deep inside you and change you from the inside out? Well, that's the question he leaves us with. But the good news is we can cultivate the soil. We're not just predestined to be some certain type of soil. We can change our hearts. You can cultivate by asking, how do you hear? That's the difference. They all heard the word. They all received the word, but some didn't stick with Jesus because they didn't understand deeply. The difference is hearing and understanding. So we're challenged. Receive the word with meekness. Will you let it break down the devil's strongholds in your heart? Will you let it transform you? Or will you only listen to the parts that you like? Will you only come when it's good and let God transform you in the ways that you already are, which really is not transformation at all. Well, that's the question Jesus leaves us with. Now, it's hard enough cultivating soil, but Jesus tells us another parable about an enemy who comes in and sows different kind of seed within the soil. We'll talk about that next time we take 5. I'll see you then.